Okay, so now we're going to talk about Module 4, Lesson 5. We're going to talk about an introduction to percents. The word percent means per 100, and so these are very, very useful for us in math because they let us compare groups of different sizes, right? Like if you talk about a class of students, you might have 12 out of 20 students that are taking an English class, for example. And if you're trying to decide whether that's high or low compared to the whole school, I mean, if the whole school has 20,000 students and 15,000 of them are taking an English class, I mean, that's impossible to compare them, right? But if you find a percentage for each of these two numbers, then you can decide whether that's high or low or not. And it's not too hard to do when you're dealing with a fraction like this. What we're going to do first is we're going to change these values into decimals. Okay, and so 12 over 20, we're just going to divide that. So 12 divided by 20 is going to give us 0.6. Okay, and to change a decimal like this into a percent, we're just going to slide that decimal 2 spots to the right. So I'll just take this decimal, slide it over 2 times, and fill in any blanks I've got with a 0. So this is going to be 60%. Okay. Similarly over here, we could do the same thing. 15,000 divided by 20,000. We just put that in our decimal. So we get 0.75, and then we slide that decimal spot 2 to the right. Okay. And we would get 75%. And so even though, my class over here versus the whole school over here has very, very different numbers of students in them, now I can say, okay, my class has a slightly lower percentage of students that are taking English than the whole school does. We can see that here. Okay, so let's just compare groups of different sizes. And that's very, very important in all kinds of math, business, science, very, very important skill to be comfortable with. So we're going to be converting back and forth between percents, decimals, and fractions in this lesson. So let's look at a few examples of that. Let's say we have 40%. Let's talk about how to change that into a decimal and change it into a fraction. So changing it into a decimal is pretty easy. We're just going to drop the percent sign off. We're going to find the decimal, and then we're just going to slide that decimal 2 spots to the left. Basically what we're doing here is we're dividing by 100. But because everything's a power of 10 here, we can just slide the decimal and make it happen. So 40% is equivalent to 0.4 or 0.40. Either way, those zeros at the end that come after the decimal, they don't really matter. So you can drop it off if you want. Most common to write it like this. So 40%, same as 0.4 as a decimal. Okay, so to change it into a fraction, what we're going to do is we're going to take it, and remember the word percent means per 100. So if we want to change it into a fraction, we're just going to take it, we're going to put it over 100, and then we're going to take that fraction, we're going to reduce it down to lowest terms. So top and bottom here both divisible by 20. So 40 divided by 20 is 2. 100 divided by 20 is 5. So 2/5 is how we're going to write that as a fraction. So again, we're going to take our percent, we're going to put it over 100, we're going to reduce to lowest terms is our strategy there. Okay, so let's do this again with 64%. So again, we want to change this into a decimal. We want to change it into a fraction. So if I want to change it into a decimal, I'm just going to bring it down, find my decimal, and then slide my decimal point 2 spots to the left. And so 64% is equivalent to 0.64 as a decimal. Okay, and if I want to change it into a fraction, I'm just going to take my 64, I'm going to put it over 100, and then I'm going to reduce this down to lowest terms. Those top and bottom there is both divisible by 4, so we want to put 4 in there. Reduce our fractions to lowest terms is basically what we're doing. Remember, you can just use that fraction key in your TI-30 calculator if you've got one of those. You do your 64, then your fraction key, 100, and it will reduce it down for you. You get that 16 over 25 right away. So nothing wrong with using your calculator to help you with reducing, especially when the values are not the easiest to look at and find what's in common. But we do need to make sure we get it into the lowest terms. Okay, so that's how we change it into a decimal and into a fraction. We can go the other way as well. If we have a decimal, like 5.6, we can change that to a percentage, and it's really just kind of the opposite, going the opposite direction of what we did in the last couple of problems. We're just going to take this, we're going to find that decimal. In this case, it's just right in there, and we're just going to slide it 2 to the right. Okay, and we're going to fill in any spots that we have with zeros. So 5.6 is equivalent to 560%. Okay, now seems strange here that percent's bigger than 100, but that's because we started with more than 1. When we're dealing with a decimal, one whole object is equivalent to 100%. So if I start with 5 whole objects, I am going to wind up with a number that's much bigger than that. So 560% to be expected for a problem like this. Okay, so we can also do the same process for a fraction if we want to change that into a percent. There's really kind of 2 steps to this. The first step is to get this in decimal form, and we've dealt with that earlier in the module. We're just going to take the top divided by the bottom. So 1 divided by 10, in this case, will give me 0.1. And then my next step is just to slide that decimal point 2 to the right, like I've done in the last couple of problems. So I'll just take my decimal here, slide it 1, 2 to the right, and so fill in any of those with zeros. And so 10, don't forget the percent sign here. You have to have that percent sign in here. If you just write 10, it's just not equivalent, right? We need that percent sign in order for it to work. Okay, so we're going to change it to a decimal by dividing, and then we're going to slide that decimal 2 spots to the right to get it into percent form. Okay, if I give you a mixed number like this and I ask you to change it to a percent, well, again, it's kind of the same process as the last problem. Our first step is to change it to a decimal. And so to do that, we're just going to do the 1 divided by 5 in our calculator. So 1 divided by 5 will give you 0.2. And then we're just going to put that on to the 4 that we have there. So that's going to be equal to 4.2. Okay, and then our next step is just to take our decimal and slide it 1, 2 spots to the right and fill in any of those that we have left over with zeros. And so then we can't forget to put our percent sign on there, and we've got to convert it over. Okay, so not too bad to convert between these 3 different strategies. Okay, we'll take some practice, but that's the approach that I would recommend. Okay, so hopefully that's enough to get you off to a good start in lesson 5, but please don't hesitate to let me know if you have any questions. Have a good day.